All right, so we're diving into this mountain of articles and links you've sent over, all about modern product management. Seems like you're really trying to get a grip on what it's all about, huh? The core ideas, the big names, even whether it lives up to all the hype.
Definitely a worthwhile deep dive, and a timely one, too. This field is constantly evolving, Makes it even more important to understand those foundations, the core of what makes it tick.
Yeah, and one thing that jumped out at me right away, just from skimming these articles, is how much emphasis there is on user-centric design.
Yeah.
Seems like it's not just about building things anymore, it's about solving real problems for real people.
Absolutely. You know that piece, Modern Product Management, Navigating the Intersection? There's a line in there that really sums it up. User centricity isn't a checkbox, it's the lens through which every product decision should be viewed.
It's like a fundamental shift in mindset,
Right,
right?
right.
Not just features for the sake of features, but actual solutions that people need and want.
Exactly. And speaking of approaches, how often did you come across the term agile methodologies? It seems to be everywhere these days.
Oh, constantly. But I'll admit, I don't fully have my head wrapped around it. What's the deal with Agile anyway?
Well, imagine this. Instead of that old waterfall method where you plan everything up front and hope for the best, agile is all about flexibility.
So more like adapting on the fly.
Exactly. Think of it like building a house, but instead of rigidly following a blueprint, you adjust based on feedback throughout the process. It allows you to adapt to changing needs, new information, whatever comes up.
Makes sense, being nimble and responsive. No wonder it's so central to this whole product management thing. And speaking of staying on track, it seems like data-driven decisions are key.
Oh, absolutely. In the past, intuition might have played a larger role, but today, data is king. It's not enough to just think a feature will be a hit, you need proof. Tracking metrics, analyzing how users actually behave, that's the gold.
So you use that data to either back up your hunches
Hmm.
or tell you when you're totally off base.
Exactly. Speaking of data, we have to talk about those strategic roadmaps we keep hearing about. It's all about steering the ship based on what the data's telling you.
Right, that's what I gathered. But it's less about sticking to a rigid plan and more about knowing when to change course.
Precisely. Just like a GPS for your product, it outlines the direction, the key stops along the way, but it needs to be flexible enough to adapt.
And that's where the data comes in.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to navigating this ever-changing landscape, there are a few names you're going to come across a lot. Individuals who have really shaped how we think about product management today.
Yeah, it's funny how certain names just kept popping up over and over in everything I read. Marty Kagan, for one.
Yeah.
That's a name you can't seem to avoid in the product management world.
And for good reason. He's all about building products that customers will truly love, not just tolerate. His book, Inspired, is practically required reading for anyone serious about this field.
So he's all about empowered teams.
Exactly, giving individuals the freedom and support to do their best work.
Got it. And then there's Eric Ries, the champion of the lean startup methodology. What's the core idea behind that in a nutshell?
Reese's work is all about getting your product out there as quickly as possible and learning from real user feedback.
So not being afraid to fail.
Not afraid, but expecting it, embracing it even. It's about understanding that not every idea is a winner, and that's okay.
Fail fast, learn fast, right?
Exactly. And we can't forget Steve Blank. Customer development is his thing, getting out of the building and talking to actual users.
Yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme.
Absolutely. You can't build a successful product if you're operating in a vacuum, relying solely on your own assumptions.
So we've got Kagan emphasizing empowered teams, Rees advocating for that rapid iteration, and Blank stressing the importance of understanding your customer. It's like their ideas, while distinct, all kind of contribute to this cohesive approach.
That's a great observation. They might come at it from slightly different angles, but there's definitely a common thread running through their work. And it's a thread that continues as we look at some of the other big names in the field.
You mean like Teresa Torres and Ken Norton? Their names came up quite a bit too.
And for good reason. Torres brings the idea of continuous discovery to the table, never stopping the process of learning about your users. Talking to them once at the beginning isn't enough. It needs to be ongoing.
So always be researching, always be learning.
Exactly. And Ken Norton, well, he's perhaps best known for his piece on how to hire a product manager. Incredibly relevant to your deep dive.
It's like a cheat sheet for finding those product management rock stars.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is how many of the qualities he highlights, empathy, strong communication, strategic thinking, align perfectly with what those other thought leaders emphasize.
So it's not just about being good with technology, it's about having the right mindset.
Absolutely. It's about understanding people and how they interact with the things we build. And that actually brings us to a point that often causes confusion, even within companies. We need to talk about the distinction between a product manager, a project manager, and a product owner.
Yeah, I noticed some overlap there, but they're not quite the same thing.
Exactly. The lines can blur in the real world, for sure. But let's start with product manager versus project manager, since that's where most of the confusion lies. Think of the product manager as the architect. They're responsible for the overall vision.
They come up with the blueprint, the why behind the product, and what it's meant to achieve in the long run.
Right. They're thinking about the big picture, making sure it all aligns with the overall business goals. Now, the project manager is more like the construction manager. Once the architect's plans are in place, they focus on the how.
So they're the ones making sure the building process runs smoothly, getting deadlines, and staying on budget.
Exactly. They manage resources, keep things moving. It's a crucial distinction for a project's success. Now, where does the product owner fit into all of this? They're more aligned with the agile world, right?
Yeah, that's what I gathered. They're like the customer's voice in the room, right?
Spot on. They represent the customer within the development team, ensuring the product being built actually meets user needs. Think of them as the client liaison.
So they're laser focused on the details of what's being built, making sure it aligns with that overall product vision that the product manager sets.
Exactly. They're constantly refining and reprioritizing what gets built based on user feedback and what's happening in the market. Now, while each role has its own area of focus, they're all part of the same team working towards a shared goal, a successful product.
It's like a well-choreographed dance, everyone playing their part. And speaking of journeys, it strikes me that product management itself has been on quite a ride, evolving so much over the years. It didn't just appear out of thin air, did it?
Not at all, and it might surprise you where it all began. What if I told you it traces back to the 1930s?
The 1930s, that's before computers even existed. Okay, you got my attention. Tell me more.
Well, it all started with a company, I'm sure you know, Procter& and Gamble.
P&G, the
Hmm.
soap and shampoo people. What does product management have to do with soap?
It's all connected. Back then, a P&G exec had this revolutionary idea. He called them brand men, individuals who would take complete ownership of a brand's success.
So like the OG product managers, but
Okay.
for soap instead of software.
Exactly. And their mission was clear. Understand the customer, know the competition inside and out, and come up with strategies to make their brand a hit. This was a big deal back then, a huge shift from the old way of doing things.
So from those humble soapy beginnings, how did we get to the tech-focused product management of today?
It's quite the evolution, actually. Over the next few decades, this whole brand management idea, it spread like wildfire, especially in the world of consumer goods. But it wasn't until the rise of the tech companies, places like Hewlett-Packard in the 60s and 70s, that the product manager as we know it really emerged.
So the tech world saw a need for someone who could bridge that gap between the business folks and the engineers. Someone to really champion the user's perspective in the whole process.
Exactly. As software started becoming central to our lives, so did product managers. And then the internet boom hit, and then mobile. Well, that just sent things into overdrive.
Product management had its own little Cambrian explosion right alongside the dot-com boom, huh? But enough about the past. Let's put on our future predicting hats for a minute. What did these articles have to say about where product management is headed next?
One thing's for sure, AI and machine learning are going to be huge. And not just in the products themselves, but in how we actually manage those products.
You mean using AI to wrangle all that data, maybe even automate some of the more routine tasks that product managers handle?
Exactly. Imagine an AI assistant that helps you analyze user data, identify patterns you might miss, even suggest potential product improvements. That frees up product managers to focus on the strategic, human-centered thinking that AI can't yet replicate.
Like having a personalized product management brain trust at your fingertips. But with all this talk about AI and efficiency, what about the human side of things? Where does that fit into the future of product management?
You're right, that human element is only becoming more important. One trend we're seeing is a much greater emphasis on customer experience. And I don't just mean a sleek interface or a cool logo.
It's about the whole journey, right? Everything someone experiences from the moment they first hear about a product to their ongoing use of it. even how they interact with customer support if something goes wrong.
Exactly. It's not enough to just have a great product anymore. You need to create a truly seamless, even delightful experience at every single touch point.
Product managers become conductors of an orchestra, making sure all those different instruments are working in harmony.
Love that analogy. And speaking of harmony, let's not forget about the trend towards remote and distributed teams. That's been building for a while, but it's really accelerated lately.
No more water cooler chats for the product team.
Maybe virtual water cooler chats?
Hmm.
But you're right, this shift to remote work presents unique challenges for product managers who often thrive on that in-person collaboration. Leading remotely requires a whole different toolkit.
It makes you wonder how you even begin to manage a team effectively when everyone's scattered across time zones, maybe even continents.
It takes a lot of intentionality. You need to be extra proactive about communication, build trust even more deliberately than with co-located teams. Transparency is essential. Everyone needs clear visibility into what everyone else is doing and why. And of course, having the right tools, the digital platforms that make collaboration seamless, that's essential.
It's like the future of work is colliding head-on with the future of product management. Makes you wonder, with all this change happening so fast, is this field just hype? Is it all going to fizzle out in a few years?
It's a fair question. With all the buzz around product management, it's easy to be skeptical, wonder if it's just a fad. But here's the thing. The need for someone who can bridge that gap between business, technology, and the user, that's not going away. In fact, I'd argue it's only going to become more important.
The role might change, might even change drastically, but the core of it, championing the user, building products that solve real problems, that feels pretty timeless to me.
It is, and the impact that strong product management can have on a company's success, it's undeniable. It's a fundamental shift in how we think about building things, about delivering value to customers. We're not just building for the sake of building anymore.
So to bring this all back to you based on everything we've talked about, it sounds like you're on the right track with this whole product management deep dive. It's a field with some serious staying power.
I'd agree with that. This deep dive has given you a taste of the core concepts, the key players, even a glimpse into the crystal ball. But it's just the tip of the iceberg, really. There's a ton more out there to explore.
Speaking of exploring, this whole journey into the world of product management, it's really got me thinking. If you were to design the ideal modern product management role, what would it look like? What would be the non-negotiables?
That's a fantastic question. And a tough one. But it's definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Because the ideal role, it probably looks different depending on the company, the product, even the team itself.
Totally. It's not like there's a single job description that fits every situation.
Exactly. But if I had to boil it down, I'd say it's about those core principles we keep coming back to. User centricity, data-driven decision-making, that collaborative spirit. So no matter what crazy innovations are coming down the pipeline, those fundamentals will always be relevant.
They will. They're the foundation. And as you go deeper into these materials you've been sharing, I challenge you to think about how those principles actually play out in different settings. User centricity might look different in a B2B company versus a B2C company, right?
Right. And how you gather and use data, that's got to be different depending on if you're in a super fast-moving market or a more stable one.
Exactly. The context matters. And here's the thing. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo as you're learning. Question those assumptions. Poke at those emerging trends.
Be a bit of a disruptor.
Why not? Innovation often comes from people who are willing to say, hey, what if we tried it this way instead? Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to invent the next big product management framework.
I like the way you think. This whole deep dive has been so insightful. I feel like I haven't just learned about what product managers do, but the whole mindset behind it.
That's what I was hoping for.
Well, mission accomplished. So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired right now, my advice is to dig into those resources we talked about. They're seriously packed with great information.
And they offer all these different perspectives, which is so valuable. But at the end of the day, product management always comes back to those core ideas. Solving problems and creating something valuable for people. Never lose sight of that, and you'll be on the right track.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yep.
This has been fantastic. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. It's been a pleasure exploring all of this with you. Until next time.